Daddy didn't like the king's guard telling his daughter to get back. Or what, mouthy tourist? She was still young, full of curiosity, and this was her first time visiting another country. He wanted her to see history with her own eyes, not just through books or screens. That morning, they walked toward a famous palace known all over the world. The building was old, beautiful, and guarded by soldiers who stood perfectly still. Tourists crowded around, taking pictures, laughing, and whispering in excitement. The daughter held her father's hand tightly. Her eyes were wide as she looked at the tall gates, the shining uniforms, and the guards who did not move at all. To her, they looked like statues from a storybook. She tugged on her father's hand and asked questions in a soft voice. Why didn't they blink? How could they stand so still? Were they real people? The father smiled and answered patiently, enjoying her wonder. As they moved closer with the crowd, the father stayed alert. He knew rules were strict in places like this. He watched the signs and kept his daughter close. But children are quick, and curiosity can pull them forward without warning. When the crowd shifted, his daughter took a small step ahead, not more than a few feet, trying to see the guard better. She did not cross any rope or barrier, but she was closer than most people. Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the air. One of the guards spoke sharply, ordering her to get back. The sound was sudden and strong. It echoed across the stone ground. The little girl froze where she stood. Her shoulders jumped and her face drained of color. She had never been spoken to like that before. The joy on her face vanished in an instant. People nearby turned their heads. Some stopped talking. Cameras lowered. The moment felt heavy. The daughter slowly stepped back, her eyes filling with tears. She rushed to her father and pressed her face into his side. Her small hands trembled as she grabbed his jacket. The father felt her fear immediately. His heart tightened. He knelt down and whispered that she was okay. He told her she had done nothing wrong. He brushed her hair back gently, trying to calm her shaking. Inside, though, something burned. He understood rules. He respected security. But the tone, the harshness, and the lack of care for a child stayed with him. He stood up slowly, keeping one hand on his daughter's shoulder. He did not rush. He did not shout. He walked forward just enough to be heard. His voice was calm when he spoke. He explained that his daughter was young and curious and had not meant any harm. He said she did not understand how close was too close. The guard did not soften. He repeated the command in a dismissive way, waving them back as if they were a problem. His words were short and cold. There was no apology, no explanation, no kindness. It felt like the father and his daughter were not people, just obstacles in the guard's space. The father felt the crowd again. He sensed eyes on his back. Some tourists shifted uncomfortably. Others pretended not to notice. The daughter held him tighter, hiding her face. Her breathing was uneven and small sobs escaped despite her trying to stay quiet. The father took a slow breath. He reminded himself that anger would not help his daughter. She needed to see calm strength, not loud conflict. He bent slightly so his voice would not rise. He told the guard that he understood the rules, but children deserve respect too. He asked politely but firmly that people speak kindly, especially to a child who was scared. For a moment, nothing happened. The guard stood stiff, his face unreadable. The silence stretched. It felt longer than it really was. The daughter peeked out from behind her father, her eyes red and wet. She watched his face, looking for reassurance. The father squeezed her hand gently. He smiled down at her, even though his chest felt tight. He wanted her to remember this moment not as fear, but as protection. He wanted her to know that her voice and her feelings mattered. Around them, the crowd shifted again. A few people nodded quietly. One woman murmured that the child had done nothing wrong. Another man frowned, clearly uncomfortable with how things had unfolded. The tension in the air was thick but controlled. The father stepped back, choosing his daughter over the argument. He guided her away from the front, giving her space to breathe. They moved to the side, where the noise was lower. He crouched again and spoke softly, telling her she was brave and that it was okay to feel scared. He wiped her tears with his thumb and waited until her breathing slowed. Inside, the father felt disappointed, not just for his daughter, but for the moment that had been taken from her. What should have been wonder turned into fear. What should have been memory turned into lesson. He knew this was only the beginning of something deeper, something that would shape how she saw the world and how she understood standing up for herself. As they stood there together, the palace still towering above them, the father made a silent promise. No matter where they were, no matter who stood in front of them, he would always protect her dignity. He would teach her that respect goes both ways, and he would show her that strength does not always shout. Sometimes, it stands quietly and refuses to move. The day was far from over, but something had already changed. The trip had taken a turn neither of them expected. And this first moment, heavy and emotional, would lead to much more than either of them could imagine. The father and daughter stood away from the crowd for a while. The noise of tourists and cameras continued around them, but for the little girl, the world still felt too loud. She stayed close to her father, holding his hand as if letting go might bring the fear back. He stayed calm on the outside, but inside his thoughts were restless. He kept replaying the moment in his head, the sharp voice, the way his daughter had frozen. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He suggested they sit on a nearby bench. From there, they could still see the palace and the guards, but at a distance that felt safer. The daughter nodded quietly. She climbed onto the bench and leaned against him. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, letting her feel his presence. Slowly, her breathing became steady again. After a few minutes, she looked up at him and asked in a small voice why the guard had sounded angry. The question hit him hard. He chose his words carefully. He told her that sometimes adults forget how strong their voices can sound, especially to children. He explained that the guard had a job to do, but that did not mean it was okay to scare someone. She listened closely, thinking about his words. She then asked if she had done something bad. The father shook his head right away. He told her clearly that she had not done anything wrong. Curiosity was not a bad thing. Learning was not a bad thing. He said rules were important, but so was kindness. She nodded slowly, as if storing that lesson somewhere deep inside her. As they sat there, the father noticed other tourists looking at them. Some glanced with sympathy. Others whispered quietly. A few parents pulled their own children closer. The moment had not gone unnoticed. The father wondered how many people had seen similar things before and chosen to stay silent. After a while, they stood up again. The daughter seemed calmer now, but she stayed very close. The father suggested they walk around the area where people could still see the palace without being near the guards. They moved slowly, stopping to look at statues and old walls. The father pointed out carvings and told small stories to distract her mind. But the tension did not fully leave. Every time a loud voice echoed or a whistle blew, the daughter flinched. The father noticed each reaction. He felt a growing responsibility, not just to comfort her, but to make sure she learned how to face moments like this without fear controlling her. As they walked, another guard passed nearby. This one did not speak harshly. He simply watched the crowd calmly. The daughter noticed and whispered that this guard looked nicer. The father smiled slightly and agreed. He told her that people are different, even when they wear the same uniform. Some remember kindness, others forget it. They stopped near a small open area where street performers sometimes stood. There were no performers that day, but it was quieter. The father crouched down so he was at her eye level. He told her that if anyone ever spoke to her in a way that made her scared, she should always come to him or speak up if she could. He told her her feelings mattered, even when others acted like they did not. She asked if standing up would make people angry. The father paused before answering. He said sometimes it might, but staying silent when something feels wrong can hurt more. He explained that there are ways to speak without shouting and ways to be strong without being mean. She looked thoughtful, absorbing every word. Nearby, a few tourists who had been close during the earlier moment walked past again. One older man stopped briefly and smiled at the girl. He said she was brave. The girl smiled shyly and hid behind her father's leg. That small moment of kindness seemed to lift her spirits just a bit more. The father thanked the man quietly. That single word of support meant more than the man probably realized. It reminded the father that not everyone in the world watched unfair moments and looked away. Some people noticed. Some people cared. Time passed and the crowd shifted again. A different group of visitors moved closer to the palace entrance. The father noticed a senior-looking officer in the distance, someone who seemed to be supervising the guards. He did not plan to cause trouble, but he also did not want the earlier moment to be ignored completely. He thought carefully. This was not about revenge or embarrassment. It was about making sure no other child felt the way his daughter had felt. He gently asked his daughter if she was okay standing there while he spoke to someone. She hesitated, then nodded, trusting him. They approached the officer slowly. The father spoke respectfully, explaining what had happened earlier. He did not raise his voice or accuse. He simply described the tone used and how it affected his child. The officer listened closely, his face serious but calm. The daughter stood quietly beside her father, holding his hand. She did not speak, but her presence said everything. Her small size next to the tall adults made the situation clear without words. The officer thanked the father for bringing it up. He apologized for the experience and said that guards were trained to protect, not to frighten. He promised to address the situation. His voice was steady and sincere. The father felt some relief, not because he needed an apology, but because someone had listened. As they walked away, the father felt lighter. He had shown his daughter that speaking up did not always lead to trouble. Sometimes it led to understanding. Sometimes it led to change, even if small. They returned to their walk, and the daughter's steps felt less heavy now. She pointed at a flag waving above the palace and asked questions again, her curiosity slowly returning. The father answered each one, grateful to hear excitement in her voice once more. Though the day had been shaken, it was not broken. And for the father, part two of this journey became about teaching strength, choosing calm, and showing his daughter that even uncomfortable moments can become lessons that last a lifetime. The afternoon sun moved slowly across the sky, and the palace grounds grew even more crowded. New tourists arrived, excited and unaware of what had happened earlier. The father and daughter walked at a relaxed pace now, but the experience still stayed with them. Even when the girl smiled, there was a quiet thought behind her eyes, as if she was learning something new about the world. They stopped near a small open space where people rested and shared snacks. The father bought her a drink and a small treat, hoping to bring back some normal joy. She accepted it with a soft smile and thanked him politely. He noticed how quickly children grow in moments like these, how one event can make them more thoughtful than before. As she ate, she asked more questions, not just about the palace this time, but about people. Why some adults were kind and others were not. Why some people listened and others ignored. The father realized this moment was shaping her understanding of fairness. He answered honestly but gently, explaining that the world was made of many kinds of people, and learning how to deal with them was part of growing up. Nearby, the guards continued their duties. Most stood still, focused and quiet. One or two walked slowly along the edge of the crowd, watching. The daughter noticed them but did not seem afraid now. She stayed close to her father, but she no longer hid. Suddenly, a small group of tourists moved too close again. This time it was not the daughter but another child, a boy around the same age. He stepped forward without noticing where he was. Before the father could even react, one of the guards lifted a hand, preparing to speak. The father's heart tightened. He watched carefully, unsure what would happen next. The guard spoke, but this time the voice was different. It was firm but controlled. The guard asked the boy to step back calmly and pointed to the correct area. The boy obeyed without fear, and his parents thanked the guard. The daughter noticed too. She looked up at her father and whispered that the guard sounded nicer this time. The father nodded. He told her quietly that sometimes speaking up can help people remember how to act. He did not say it with pride, but with hope. A short time later, the senior officer they had spoken to earlier walked by again. He noticed the father and daughter and gave a small, respectful nod. The father returned it. No words were needed. The moment felt complete. As the day went on, the father decided it was time to head toward a quieter part of the grounds. They found a shaded path lined with trees and benches. The sounds of the crowd faded, replaced by footsteps and distant voices. It felt peaceful, like a pause after a storm. They sat together again. This time, the daughter leaned against him not out of fear but comfort. She asked him if he ever felt scared when he was young. The question surprised him, but he answered honestly. He told her that everyone feels scared sometimes, even adults. What matters is what you do after that fear shows up. She asked if he was scared earlier. He smiled softly and said he was more worried than scared, worried that she had been hurt, even if only in her heart. She looked thoughtful and said she was glad he was there. Those words stayed with him. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. The father realized that this part of the trip, though unexpected, was becoming something meaningful. It was no longer just about seeing a famous place. It was about teaching his daughter how to face uncomfortable moments and still move forward. As they rested, a woman nearby struck up a small conversation. She had seen the earlier situation and wanted to check if the girl was okay. The father thanked her. The woman spoke kindly to the daughter, telling her she had done nothing wrong. The daughter smiled again, more openly this time. These small acts of kindness began to balance out the earlier moment. The father felt grateful. He knew the world could be harsh, but it could also be gentle in quiet ways. After a while, they stood up and continued walking. The daughter began pointing out small details again: birds on the walls, patterns on the stones, flags moving in the wind. Her curiosity was back, though now mixed with awareness. They reached a viewpoint where the palace looked especially beautiful. The father took a picture of his daughter standing there, sunlight behind her. She smiled naturally, no fear in her face. He knew this was the image he would remember, not the tears. As they prepared to leave the grounds, the father reflected on everything that had happened. He realized that part 3 of this journey was not about conflict anymore. It was about change. Not loud change, but quiet improvement. It was about seeing that speaking up calmly could make a difference, even if small. The daughter held his hand firmly as they walked toward the exit. She looked up at him and said she felt better now. He told her he was proud of her for being brave. She smiled and squeezed his hand. The palace gate stood behind them as they left, still grand and unmoving. But for the father and daughter, something inside had shifted. They were leaving with more than pictures. They were leaving with lessons, strength, and a deeper trust between them. The next morning felt different from the start. The father woke up early and watched his daughter sleeping peacefully. Her face was calm, no signs of fear from the day before. He sat quietly for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. He knew yesterday had left a mark on both of them, but he also knew it had made them stronger in a quiet way. When the daughter woke up, she smiled and stretched, then immediately asked what they were doing today. Her voice sounded lighter. The father felt relief. He told her they would explore the city, see small streets, eat local food, and enjoy the day without rushing. She seemed excited, and that excitement felt real. They left their hotel and stepped into the busy streets. The city was alive with movement and sound. People walked quickly, cars passed, and shops opened their doors. The daughter held her father's hand as they walked, not because she was scared, but because it felt natural. He noticed how her grip was firm but relaxed. As they walked, they passed places guarded by security again. This time, the daughter noticed them but did not stop or stare. She glanced at her father instead. He smiled back at her, silently reminding her she was safe. She smiled too and kept walking. They stopped at a small cafe and sat outside. The father ordered breakfast and they watched people pass by. The daughter asked if they would ever go back to the palace area. The father paused before answering. He asked her how she felt about it. She thought for a moment and said she was not scared anymore, but she did not want to go too close again. The father respected her honesty. He told her that it was okay to set boundaries and that listening to her feelings was important. She nodded, looking proud of herself for saying it out loud. As they ate, the father noticed something new in his daughter. She seemed more observant. She watched how people spoke to each other, how some smiled and others rushed. She asked why some people looked tired and others happy. The father explained that everyone carries their own stories, and sometimes you can see them in how they act. Later that day, they visited a park filled with families. Children played, parents talked, and laughter filled the air. The daughter ran ahead toward the swings, asking her father to watch. He sat nearby, keeping his eyes on her. She laughed as she swung higher, her earlier fear replaced by joy. At one point, another child accidentally bumped into her while running. The daughter stumbled but did not fall. The other child stopped and apologized. The daughter paused, then smiled and said it was okay. The father watched closely. She had handled the moment calmly, without panic or anger. That small moment stayed with him. He realized that she was already using what she had learned. She was understanding that not every sudden moment meant danger, and not every loud voice meant harm. As the day continued, they sat on a bench together, watching the sky slowly change color. The daughter leaned against her father and asked if people always listen when you speak up. The father answered honestly. He said not always, but that did not mean you should stop speaking. He explained that sometimes speaking up is not about changing others, but about respecting yourself. She asked if he would always speak up for her. He smiled and told her yes, but he also wanted to teach her how to speak up for herself when she was ready. She listened quietly, understanding more than her age suggested. In the evening, they returned to their hotel. The father noticed how tired his daughter was, not just from walking, but from processing emotions. After dinner, she sat beside him and asked him to tell her a story. He chose a simple story about a young person learning courage through small choices. She listened closely until her eyes slowly closed. As she slept, the father reflected again. He realized that part 4 of this journey was about consequences, not in a negative way, but in growth. The consequence of yesterday's moment was not fear, it was awareness. It was learning how to face the world with calm strength. He also thought about himself. He had learned something too. He had learned that protecting a child's dignity matters just as much as protecting their safety. He had learned that staying calm under pressure shows strength, not weakness. The next day, as they prepared to leave the city, the daughter packed her small bag carefully. She placed a postcard of the palace inside. The father asked her why she wanted to keep it. She said it reminded her of the trip and of how she felt brave at the end. They walked through the lobby together, ready to head home. The father felt a sense of closure. The trip had not gone perfectly, but maybe that was the point. Life rarely does. As they stepped outside, the daughter looked up at him and said she felt older somehow. The father laughed softly and told her that growing happens in moments we do not expect. She squeezed his hand and said she liked growing with him there. They walked forward together, leaving the city behind. The father knew that this part of the story was shaping who his daughter would become. Not someone who fears the world, but someone who understands it, questions it, and moves through it with confidence. Part 4 was not loud or dramatic. It was steady. It was about healing, understanding, and quiet strength. And it prepared both of them for the final part of their journey, one where lessons would settle into memories that last a lifetime. The journey home felt quiet in a good way. The long train ride gave the father and daughter time to sit close, watch the world pass by the window, and think. The daughter rested her head against her father's arm, holding the postcard she had kept from the trip. She traced the picture with her finger, not with sadness but with calm reflection. The father watched her carefully. He could see how much she had changed in just a few days. She still smiled easily, still asked questions, but there was a new steadiness in her voice. It was as if she had learned that the world could surprise you, sometimes in ways you do not expect, and that you can still stand strong. When they arrived home, familiar sounds greeted them. The street looked the same as always. Neighbors passed by, shops opened and closed, and life continued as usual. Yet for them, something was different. The trip had ended, but the lesson had come with them. That evening, they unpacked together. The daughter placed her small souvenirs carefully on her shelf. When she reached the postcard, she paused. She asked her father if it was okay to keep it even though part of the trip had been scary. The father told her that it was okay to remember everything, both the good and the hard. He explained that memories do not have to be perfect to be meaningful. She nodded and placed the postcard next to her favorite book. Then she turned and hugged him tightly. The hug was warm and strong, not rushed. The father closed his eyes for a moment and returned it, feeling proud and grateful. Over the next few days, life returned to routine. School, homework, meals, and bedtime stories filled their time, but small moments showed how much the trip had shaped her. One afternoon, she told him about a classmate who had been spoken to sharply by another child. Instead of staying quiet, she had calmly told the other child to stop. She was nervous, but she remembered what her father had said. The father listened closely. He praised her for speaking up kindly and calmly. He did not make it sound like a big heroic act. He treated it as something natural, something she was capable of. She smiled, clearly proud of herself. Another day, she asked him why some people with authority forget to be gentle. The father answered honestly, saying that sometimes people focus too much on rules and forget the people around them. He reminded her that having responsibility should mean having care as well. She listened, taking in every word. Weeks passed and the memory of the palace slowly became less sharp, but it did not fade. It settled. The daughter no longer spoke about it with fear. She spoke about it like a story, one that had meaning. One evening, while they were walking together after dinner, she asked him a question that surprised him. She asked if he was proud of how he handled things. The father paused. He realized he had not asked himself that before. He told her that he was proud, not because he had argued or corrected someone, but because he had stayed calm and focused on her. She smiled and said she felt safe with him there. Those words stayed with him long after they returned home. The father also noticed changes in himself. He found himself more aware of how people spoke to children around him. When he saw moments of kindness, he appreciated them more. When he saw moments of carelessness, he felt a quiet urge to remind others that words matter. One weekend, they visited a local museum. It was smaller than the palace but still had security and rules. The daughter stayed close, but she did not hesitate. When a guard gave instructions, she listened calmly and followed them without fear. The father watched her carefully. She was confident, not tense. At one point, another child looked confused about where to stand. The daughter gently pointed to the correct spot and smiled. The other child smiled back. The father felt a deep sense of pride. That night, as they sat together reading, the daughter asked him what lesson he wanted her to remember most from the trip. The father thought carefully. He told her that he wanted her to remember that her feelings matter, that respect should be shared, and that calm strength can change more than loud anger. She repeated those words quietly, as if memorizing them. Then she asked if he had learned anything too. He smiled and said yes. He had learned that being a parent means learning alongside your child, not just teaching. As time moved on, the story of the trip became part of their shared history, not something heavy, but something meaningful. It became a reminder of trust, courage, and communication. One afternoon, while organizing old photos, the father came across the picture he had taken of her near the palace, sunlight behind her, smiling. He showed it to her. She looked at it and said she remembered that moment clearly. She remembered feeling calm again. The father realized then that the ending of this story was not about the guard, the palace, or the conflict. It was about the bond between a father and daughter, strengthened by honesty and care. Years later, when she would face harder moments, louder voices, or unfair situations, this lesson would still be with her. Not as fear, but as confidence. Not as anger, but as understanding. That was the true ending. Not a dramatic finish, but a quiet one. A child who learned she was protected, a father who learned the power of calm strength, and a memory that became a foundation instead of a wound.